say I didn't warn you.
La 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 la. Alright, greetings, ladies and gentle monsters. I am your very special host, Immortal Brendel. And today, we have a pretty interesting podcast. Today's discussion is about concepts in survival horrors, in the survival horror genre. Joined today with my very interesting panel is, start from the top, Baron. I'm gonna call you that. Can you introduce yourself?
Yeah, it's me, Bern. Your favorite Mexican player, I think. I hope. Thanks.
You're welcome.
Question mark. Bio Double Doom. Introduce yourself.
Hi, I'm running on like 3.5 hours worth of sleep, and I just got back home from work not too long ago, so I'm tired as shit.
Nice. Living a dream. Black Shadow. Introduce yourself.
Yeah, Ariel, Black Shadow here. Ready for another podcast. At time of recording, I think it is 26 days, I think, until RA Village comes out. And if the quality of memes anything to go by, it should be the best game made ever by anyone for all of eternity.
Yeah.
And so I hope so.
Yeah, it's definitely the game looking kind of sharp, and plus the memes should never die.
Thank Lady Dimitrescu for everything, apparently. Absolutely anything.
And her daughters. Do not forget her goddaughters.
This is true, admittedly, yes.
The thirst is real.
Yes.
Innuendos, everyone. Hooray.
Yeah. All right. Lily Grey Wolf. Introduce yourself.
Hello, I've been in for a couple podcasts so far, and looking forward to this one with its interesting setup.
All right. Paragon Operative. Can you talk?
Yes, I can. Hello. And yeah, I'm excited for this podcast.
All right. And last but not least, World Creator. Can you speak up?
Yeah, hello everyone. I'm the CEO of Persifera Studios and Apocalyptic Universe, and I look
Nice.
forward to talking to all of you and maybe learning one or two things.
All right. All right.
You
Now
forgot
the-
me, you son of a bitch.
Oh,
Oh,
Eli is
Eli.
on the receiving end.
Not on
You
purpose.
fucking asshole.
I was wondering too.
Hey, Eli, man. How you doing? Introduce yourself.
So it was you all along.
It
does
was
that
me,
all the
Eli.
time.
That's my one horror reference that I can make.
It was me, Eli. I don't want to skip you on purpose.
To be fair, this is the part of the podcast that either gets cut out for decency purposes or gets left in. Either way, it's a
Oh, we're
statement
leaving
to
this
me,
in.
mate. Well, lucky you.
It's a 50-50 chance.
That's probably good odds.
Yeah.
Anyway,
All right. Eli. Intro. Now.
Hey, I'm just here to make some good friends.
You sad individual. All right, to real number one, puzzles. Like for this concept of survival horror genre, puzzles are usually placed in the survival horror games to break up the monotony of running around, gunning, and you name it. All right, players are in need to test their wits out by just simply doing puzzles. What do you guys think of puzzles in horror games?
You mind if I go first on this one?
No, I mean go ahead.
So as of late, I've been hearing kind of people talk about puzzles, whether it be in our server or outside of the server. And it's kind of like what I notice is like two different thought processes of it. It's either people really hate puzzles or people really find them interesting and feel like that's part of the identity of a survival horror game. I kind of think of it as like, well, with survival horror, you're trying to solve a mystery of like what's going on. You're kind of trying to do some like almost like detective work, right? So having like these puzzles to kind of break up the monotony and also just really having things that kind of challenge you in terms of challenge you to like think about how you're going to progress while solving this puzzle, and also thinking about the context of the puzzle in terms of the lore and what it signifies or what it symbolizes within that like particular game. Like Resident Evil has a bunch of different puzzles throughout the series, right? where the puzzles have some sort of reference to something in relation to that particular game, or some sort of like outside reference, whether it be like biblical or mythological kind of reference, right? Same kind of deal with like the Silent Hill series, right? They all have like some kind of reference to a bigger thing, right? So I don't know. I just feel like when it comes to puzzles, it's nice to have. You know, it makes you really think about a lot of different things, and it also kind of challenges you in terms of just trying to sharpen those like sort of detective skills, so to speak, in a survival horror game, right?
Yeah,
I agree. Also, it doesn't just stem from like those IPs though. Real quick, I use that same like logic and ground point in like series like Devil May Cry, for example. He took up puzzles in the fifth game though. As I always say, like I do miss them because it breaks up the monotony. Plus, it's kind of creative how they do the puzzles in those games in contrast to others. So I think it's nice to actually have puzzles every now and then for certain games, including
Yeah,
regardless of genre. This
Yeah, I do agree. Like, I don't know. I'm not heavily against puzzles. I think it's one of those things where, um, like I play Onimusha a lot, right? And Onimusha is known to have like ridiculously like either easy puzzles or difficult puzzles. One puzzle, at least in the first game, is known to basically cause people to rage quit that whole game and never touch it again. But I don't know. I've always kind of loved that idea of just like there's this thing that could easily like halt all progression, or there's this puzzle that could kill you if you do it wrong. So you have to be aware of like you have to have an attention to detail, and I've always kind of liked that about games like that that include puzzles. So
I think they are a little bit. They're kind of a bit of a callback to gaming's history in a way. If you think back, survival horror is hardly new. It's been around, like 25 years, 30 years, depending on how you want to look at it. And obviously, you go back that sort of like the time. Games didn't have the ability to have these vast, sprawling environments you explore and go and do all this sort of things. Games ultimately had incredibly limited amounts of space and data and stuff that you can evolve in, and that ultimately meant that the worlds you explore are pretty heavily limited. I did not too long ago. I was doing streams of the original Alone in the Dark from like 1924 or whenever it came out. I forget exactly. That might have been an exaggeration. But obviously,
no, that's like the time period of the game.
I think actually you might be right.
Yeah,
Actually.
I think you got it mixed up. Like that's the time period of the game. Like the first three games are like set in like the late 1920s, early 1930s.
I honestly don't remember.
And,
I'll take it. At least I'm half right. The point I'm trying to make is that what you explore is a manor house and some underground tunnels. Now,
yeah,
in a game nowadays, you would never get away with that. You would be absolutely, completely shafted for it. But obviously, at the time, there's only so much you could do. So puzzles, along with the some ways, was a way of trying to kind of get more out of the limitations that you had. It was a way to kind of keep people in the same sort of area, manipulating a few objects and kind of fixing them, and whatever else, that sort of thing, and kind of extending the time people spent on a game where you couldn't just explore, like 100 towns. You had one at most if you could explore half of that. So
right. I think like just in that regard too, because we're talking about like limitations, right? It's a good way, at least with those older games. It was a good way to kind of mask like the overall like playtime of the game, because like if you didn't like, let's take Alone in the Dark or even the original Resident Evil, right? If you like removed any of the puzzles or all of the puzzles in those games, like those games would be significantly shorter. Like you'd probably be able to beat like the original Resident Evil in like half an hour, maybe an hour at best, right? If you didn't know
in theory,
what to do.
yeah, it's a lifeblood of the game.
Granted, you can actually do that with the puzzles in the game. It's just that it's one of those things where it's like if you completely got rid of those, then it kind of, at least in the case of the original Resident Evil, right? It kind of defeats the purpose of the game. Like you're supposed to kind of go through this mansion not really knowing what's going on, not really understanding the the issue, well, not issues, but the dangers that lie ahead, and you're trying to solve what's going on and investigate all these little things that kind of lead to the overall narrative. So
Yeah. But what it's done is by being a heavy part of these games when the genre sort of started developing, it ended up becoming a staple. And what's ended up happening is as you've then gone through your time periods into your Silent Hills, into, this horror game, that horror game, is that they've kind of been very reluctant developers to take them out because it's part of what makes survival horror. And now the issue you've got is now you've got much more modern games now have to try and incorporate that same sort of puzzle style into these games where you don't necessarily have to be doing it for limitations. Now, some games do this really well. I still argue, I think, Resident Evil Remake 2, I think, did it exceptionally well. The puzzles are there or thereabouts. They're usually kind of contextual, but it's nothing too crazy intensive. It's something sort of that you can do, and they're kind of cute. But it's not something that I think everyone gets right at all. And it's difficult to find a balance now, between exploration and puzzle solving. You need that element to kind of, as a degree of investment. But obviously, you can't overdo it because you're not there to solve a puzzle game. Ultimately, you're there for a horror game that you're trying to survive. So it creates this very kind of weird balance that developers have to find now from what was a necessity if you go back 20 years.
Yeah, that's a good example for using Resident Evil 2 remake. Like the whole environment itself technically is one giant puzzle once you get the hang of things.
Yeah,
I end up loving the puzzles more too.
Mm-hmm.
One thing
Because-
that sorry.
Oh no, but I was just saying that it definitely adds to the atmosphere for and just the setting for a lot of different games. Because as you're going through, like, to really think like as like an example in like Resident Evil, like when they have like the Spencer Mansion and you're going through and it's like it adds like a layer to like how twisted was this person to like build their mansion in this like way with all these gimmicks, but
Spencer.
yeah, definitely. Where it's just like, so not only did he, create a whole bunch of like other like creepy nonsense, but even down to the very detail of like the place where he lived and did a lot of the research, he would mess with people. And sometimes that like adds a lot to just like the survival horror atmosphere of just how messed up is this person, like what are they doing. It goes back to like the idea of like serial killers that would do stuff like that, where there's like the big haunted like hotels or something where there would be rooms where you'd open a door into a brick wall or something, or the stairs wouldn't go anywhere, trapdoors, things like that are just like inherently creepy. Where it's
Like,
just,
I imagine that like the guy needs to go to the bathroom. He like tries opening the door. He's like, "Oh damn, I need the red jewel for this. What is a red jewel? Oh right, I left it like at the top of the shelf in the book, hidden behind. Like, oh damn it."
yeah, exactly. Where it's just like what sort of like purpose some of that stuff had and like what it adds to the atmosphere the more you think on it.
Yeah, that's
Yeah.
actually what I was gonna say quickly. One thing that I love about the puzzles in some games, now that I've recently been playing through all of the Resident Evil games, is that like some people maybe they complain about puzzles saying that like they seem out of place or things like that. But I think that the Resident Evil puzzles, at least most of the ones that I remember, they do actually look like they could be in a place like that, and they seem not only relevant in the context of the game, but also in terms of the either mythology of the game, the lore of the game, and stuff like that. And I think that's something that actually makes the puzzle feels more genuine because you really feel like you're learning something with that. Sorry.
Yeah, and that definitely like adds like to the setting in certain games where they have something where it's either just a key code or a series of keys, even if it's a really weird key that you have to assemble several pieces to, get through somewhere, which they've done in like Resident Evil and a bunch of other games. But to some extent, there's also just, that story quality of, oh, well, it was like, this big doofy, like thing that would fit into the mechanism, but oh, it's broken, and that's why there are multiple pieces. Or, we would have different people carry the key cards or something like that makes it a lot more realistic, but still like makes you go through motions to collect the pieces to, get through a point. That's a cat.
Meow.
Yeah,
I
just
thought you had a wolf
to
near you.
just to kind of finish this, because I think we're taking too long. I think I agree with everything that you all said. I think a great puzzle makes it a great puzzle should be, like not too easy, not too difficult, and that's also relevant to the story too, as someone said by David, I think. For example, if you were making a game about I don't know, a detective, so it makes a lot of sense to make a puzzle there. But I also feel it sometimes is not necessary to if it doesn't add anything to the game. Otherwise, it could be seen, just like to add more time, more game time to it.
Oh, sorry. Anything else to add on this one, guys? Renegade?
No, not really. I think we should move on.
Should move on? No, Renegade, you're the guest of honors, man. Rate off whatever you want.
Let me see if I can find an interesting one.
There's plenty.
I
wrote it.
will, yeah. I mean, well, just because I wrote it, it's still a lot to look through. I would say number 11, Stalker and the unkillable enemy. So there are points where a relentless pursuer will chase the player through a level. These are special enemies capable of chasing you from room to room, or they might be unkillable. What do you think about this premise in a horror game?
Can I add something to that point? Actually, since mostly because I recently played also the Resident Evil 2 and 3 remakes.
Sure.
Can I just say how much I loved the Mr. X mechanic in the RPG? It's amazing how you feel really chased when the guy, like, you're walking down the aisle and something, and then you just hear like boom. You're like, oh shit, he's down the hall. And then you start hearing the music, you start hearing the footsteps. I love that mechanic. And I think that Resident Evil 2 remake really did it amazingly, because while I was playing, I never knew when Mr. X was going to appear. But when I played Resident Evil 3, I think Nemesis like had specific points marked for his appearances. So I think it was a lot different. And I think that a lot of games, even though they do the stalker and unkillable chaser mechanic, some don't do it as well as Resident Evil 2 did it. I don't know if the original Resident Evil 2 did it as good as the remake, but I think it's really important that some games that are gonna do the unkillable stalker mechanic, they need to do it really well. Like, you need to at least have a way to stun the stalker. All right, hide, and then you have, like, I don't know, 2 minutes to start doing the whole other stuff, and then he starts chasing you again. You're like, all right, I need to really make a route for where I need to go, need to do the stuff that I need to do, and continue with my game. Because some other games are just like, oh, the guy is chasing you all the time. No matter where you go, no matter where you go, he's just chasing you all the time. And that just feels like he's gonna kill me anyway. Anyway, anywhere.
Yeah, it's
So, can I make a quick point about that really quick?
Sure, go.
So like, I like the Resident Evil 3 remake, but the one thing I will agree with on people is that, like, the way that Nemesis was handled, the original RE3 was just so much better, because Nemesis could come up at any particular point and start wreaking havoc on the player. But as a way to counterbalance that, you could, as the player, like, fight on Nemesis and take him down for a temporary amount of time, and that gave you some breathing room as to what you could do. Otherwise, you're going to be chased up until whenever the next scripted event is going to be. I'm not necessarily against unkillable pursuers, but I think a I think the way that the original Resident Evil 3 handled it, that's more of an ideal way to approach it. Technically, the original RE2 did it as well, but not to the extent as RE3. Where if you take down your pursuer, you got rewarded with like ammo or gun parts and things of that nature. So I think if they're going to do something like that, it needs to be, at least in my opinion, I would like some way to fight back, or some kind of incentive to be like, if you do fight back, you could take them down for a temporary amount of time. And I don't mean like the shit with like the remakes where, you know, they just crouch down for like 1 to 2 seconds and then just get back up almost immediately. Alternatively, though, you could have like an unkillable pursuer, and I really like the way that it was done in the first Evil Within, in Chapter 9, where Ruvik was in his manor, and he would pop up at random and kind of lead you into hazards. That was, from what was advertised for the game, or at least what was talked about from PR people from Bethesda. That's what the entirety of the Evil Within was supposed to be about, or was going to be like. But unfortunately, at least with the official release, that's not the case. It's only that one chapter where Ruvik tends to pursue you. So
Yeah,
Yeah,
I mean,
I was honestly about to reference that one too, where it's that one creature that's killable with fire, right? From the Evil Within.
no, I'm talking about Ruvik.
Oh, Ruvik.
I'm not talking about anything else. I'm just talking strictly Ruvik, because
Okay.
with Ruvik it's chapter 9, where you go in, you basically go into a version of his house, or his mansion, his family mansion. And you basically go into the parts that are not sealed off. So you go into parts where like there's like a piano room, and you see sort of like these flashbacks kind of indicating what led to the point of the creation of STEM.
Okay.
And so as that's happening, Ruvik will pop up at random points, and, you know, again, he'll kind of lead you into certain hazards, whether it be traps within the house or other enemy types. There are times where he himself will actually transform an enemy into himself, so that way he can start pursuing you. So you might like see a haunted in a room, and then start to engage it, and then all of a sudden it turns into Ruvik, and then you have to run the other way because, you know, it's a one-hit kill. So
I want to say that mission took me like an hour, my first time. Like an hour and a half just to get through that mansion.
Back on point, I want to say that the unkillable enemy is fine. It just depends on the circumstance. I mean, I didn't really have a problem with it in Resident Evil Remake 1, so it just depends on the spacing and if it's done well. If it's like just a guy comes up to you and one hit kills you and you can't do anything, which is what some of the Evil Within 1 bosses did, then it's pretty much kind of bad in a sense. But
it was an irritation, wasn't it?
yeah, it just gets annoying after a while if it's like that and there's really no place to hide or there's no spacing. But if there is, and if you can like get around it, then I totally don't mind it. It's just a parameter of mixing like one hit kills or unkillable at the same time, and that's when I think it gets a little bit weird.
I think it kind of depends on the context of the like the game and setting. Like for unkillable ones, like say like the Resident Evil series, for example, you have 7 that Jack Baker's unkillable, right? But that's because of the virus he has, so that makes him unkillable by normal means. So that makes sense for him to be unkillable. Then on the flip side, you have I forgot what that creature is called. You know,
Four?
Salazar's right hand man.
Verdugo.
Yeah, Verdugo. Now he is unkillable by normal means, but once you freeze him, that's when you do damage though. So I think that's a good example of like, say, a pursuer type enemy that's killable, but also non-killable by other contexts.
I think there's 2 points that need to be taken from this. You bring up Jack, which brings up an point that while he's unkillable and there's plot reason for doing it, it's never used like excessively against the player. You're not kind of like you're not punished in a way by the fact he's unkillable, and that you just like. Yeah, one of the worst things of fighting something like that is that you spend a ton of resources trying to defeat something, only to then find out that you can't actually defeat it, and you're just sitting there with a ton of used resources. But what do I do? Do I just reload the game? Not really a position you want to be.
Well, in a way though, that is kind of punishing the player though, because now that's punishing you based on your knowledge. Like you wouldn't know that he's not killable, right?
Oh yeah,
Like
but
in contrast to.
What I want to try to say with something like Jack, for example, or the Tyrant, or Nemesis, or all any of those sort of things, is that you'll never get no return. At the very least, you kind of down them temporarily, and then it becomes always like, okay, so I can spend resources to buy myself done, so I can get away. But it's not like there's never a point where you just sink like 100 rounds into something, only to find out that you could have sunk 1,000,000 into them, and nothing would ever have happened. That's what I'm trying to say. Like, there's always some sort of you're always trying to get something out of them. And I think what's more important, anyways, is kind of it's not so much them when they're in your face; it's kind of the threat of them appearing. I think that's why someone like Nemesis, for example, helped popularize the whole idea so much. It wasn't so much scary when he turned up; it was the fear of him turning up, because you didn't know when it was going to happen. You knew it was coming. You knew every now and again he was going to harass you, and you have to deal with it, but you didn't know quite when. And that's what I think was more effective.
Now, what the thing with Nemesis though is like, unlike in like say remake, no, in the original, you're heavily rewarded for taking him down. So like, if you choose to do it though, you would be graciously rewarded with something for your time and resources being wasted. In contrast to the original, all you getting really just a couple of shotgun shells, rounds, or maybe a gun part here and there, right? In contrast to the original, you get new guns, ammo, and on top of other goodies.
Yeah, there's definitely value for it, but it's just I think that however you want to do it is fine. It's just when you have these where there's like something that's just you end up just constantly shooting and shooting and shooting, and you get nothing back, and you end up with people in positions where they've just tons of resources into something, and then realize that they couldn't have done anything anyways, and you're just sitting there like, well, what the hell do I do now? And that's very frustrating. And I think it shows that the more notable, memorable examples were never ever like that.
That's why I brought up the original Nemesis in particular, or even like the original Mr. X, because I don't. Granted, I know like for the remakes they kind of based that off of Jack for RE7, and I guess you can make the argument that that works well for Jack, but I don't think it really works well for like Mr. X or Nemesis. I think it was better that you were able to like actually down them for basically a temporary amount of time and see them like basically bleed out for a moment, and like
but even Jack games. That's still the case, and it kind of goes into the whole idea of you're just trying to just purely survive. So I think in a more contextual idea, I think it works a bit better, but the point is taken.
Well, yeah, for the original Mr. X and Nemesis each, like if you go back and play like on arrange mode for each of the originals, and you just pump them full of a bunch of rounds, they don't just down like temporarily. It's for that whole segment of the game. They don't get back up. So that does make a big difference for, especially if you're playing on arrange mode and you have all the like infinite ammo guns and you're playing through, like it just takes the fear right out of them to just, be like, okay, we're done. Like here he is. Like,
especially in like
another enemy.
I'm sorry, real quick, especially in 3's case, because Nemesis will follow you to another room unless he's blocked from doing it. Whereas Mr. X, on the other hand, though, he's stuck in that one segment of the room. Like, for example, the hallway in RPD and B scenario, once you go in and leave that spot, though, he doesn't follow you. Whereas Nemesis, though, he will go his way to follow you so long as it's like scripted for him to go to that room.
I just wanted
that's
to
a big difference.
Yeah, I just wanted to add on that I really like it when you do down them in one segment and they don't get back up until at least you go grab a key item. That's also like kind of survival horror tropes where enemies really don't spawn or randomize until you pick something up that you actually need to progress to the next area. So I prefer it that way, where it's like the tension is kind of off your shoulders until you're ready to go again and you get that key item.
Also, real quick, right before we get off this topic, I want to talk about PT. And I know we've been talking a lot about like someone who's like actively pursuing you, but in PT, you had Lisa, who's actively stalking you, like actually watching the player, and that's something I really, really love in my games.
Like the story that you cannot see,
or someone who's like always watching you, no matter what you're doing.
Yeah, we don't get many stories like that.
Yeah, we
Yeah,
don't.
maybe like Alien, for example, might be another example. It's sort of that idea, although not quite. It's close
Well,
enough. I think.
no,
Yeah.
yeah, Ray and Fellow Frame. Yeah, like pursuers that I ain't talking about like enemies that are stealthy. I'm talking about ones that you legit cannot see like on screen
well,
at all.
I suppose, yeah, this is true.
Ruvik, I guess, if you really want to get into it.
Though technicality, yes, because he's technically not on screen. He just fucks with an enemy and turns into him and does that.
Yeah, I was gonna say
Well,
in
yeah,
Fatal Frame as well, where sometimes you don't even know that a ghost is there, and you hear sounds, and if you aren't like paying attention, they're like right there, and you can't even see them yet. Or sometimes they're just floating around for a while, and you can't see them, and you know there is a ghost here because there was a sound and the filaments lit up, but you don't see them yet, and that can add like a lot of tension as well.
Yeah, that's what I really enjoyed in Fatal Frame. And as I said in chat, this would be right for an opportunity for something like maybe a Predator survival horror game, because that thing can literally cloak. And I thought it was so cool fighting that thing in Ghost Recon Wildlands. So I'm not surprised that that idea would be kind of right for the taking if they did something like that. But that's just diverging, so I'm going to move on to the next one. I think we're done with this, right?
I had wanted to mention a couple other games because we spent a lot of time on Resident Evil specifically, but one of the games that does this a lot throughout the series is Siren. So they have the unkillable enemies throughout the whole game, and I kind of hated it, where you could, like spend a ton of resources to get them to just stop, but then, 20 seconds later, they're back up on their feet following you, and it's just like there was nothing you could do. Haunting Ground was another one that I was going to mention too, where throughout, and we have a separate category for games like that in Clock Tower.
Oh yeah,
so-
Haunting Ground is definitely a good
Yeah.
example of
Yeah.
pursuers because you get a pursuer like every act in a way, and each of them are function differently.
Where they're more like bosses, and you can do like temporary things to stop them with some of the like extra items you can like throw at them, or obstacles to stop them. And Clock Tower has like a similar way that it will function with things like that.
Or
And
take
then,
advantage of their characteristics, like with Daniela, I believe her name was.
Yeah.
Yeah. for
Yeah,
Hunting Ground,
where
yeah.
you also have stuff like Silent Hill does a few of those throughout the series as well, where you have Pyramid Head who recurs, even though technically there are certain parts where you kind of get him to go away. He still is like an unkillable enemy, as well as like the ghosts or Walter and 4.
But I think that it kind of depends on the type of games. Like for example, that you mentioned Clock Tower. Like I dislike or I complain a lot about Clock Tower 3 gameplay and the way that the Stalker formula was made for that game. It's actually really well done. In the case that, well, basically you have like, I don't know, 5 or 6 levels in the whole game. Each level has a different Stalker, and once you meet the Stalker, they will be chasing you all the time. You gotta run from them. You can defend from them using like the holy water jug or something, or you can hide from them. But they can find you if your fear level is like way too high. And I actually like that mechanic a lot while playing. Like I felt that like I was getting really nervous the first time I played it because of that, because I was like really being like, oh damn, what did I do? And it was I think that's a good way of doing the Stalker formula. At least that's what I felt. That's why I also like remodeled for the same kind of reason.
All right, so is
Okay,
everyone done with
I'll,
this one?
Yeah, I could read off the next one. So I could just pick anyone, right?
Yep.
So I'm gonna do number 5, run and hide simulators. You might find that there are certain survival horror games where the protagonist does not wield a weapon due to the game design. Therefore, you're forced to rely on stealth and running away to survive. I, in particular, really hate this gimmick, mainly because it's so overdone in the indie scene that had it been like 1 or 2 games and it was every so often, I wouldn't have minded. But literally, like 90% of indie devs go for this type of survival horror game, and it's so unoriginal. It is one of the it is one of the most boring style of survival horror games, in my opinion.
Yeah,
I-
I agree.
Yeah,
No.
I have to agree with you.
Now, I understand that you can maybe make the counter argument of, well, you can look at something like Clock Tower or Haunting Ground, which also kind of do the same thing, where you're essentially running away from your pursuer. But at least in both of those types of games, Clock Tower and Haunting Ground, you're essentially using your environment to defend against anything that's pursuing you. So at least in those games, I feel like that's a little bit more forgiving because it's like you have some means of defense. Whereas like
Well,
something
hold on, sorry to cut you off though, but you also got to realize the context of certain games. Like not all games going to have that same type of gimmick as Clock Tower or Haunted Ground. Yeah, you can use the environment against them too though, but you can also use the environment to actually throw off your pursuer and get to another point of the room where you need to go. Case in point, I'm gonna use Atlas One as an example, mostly the first game because this one does it the best. While let's say Chris Walker, he is your pursuer throughout the main game until the end of the game, right? You cannot fight him because he will crush you. No shit, right? But you can use your environment to outsmart him because he's not the most intelligent guy in the world. So either you go to another room where you go slide through the cracks, evade him, or hide in the locker until he starts checking the area, and then yeet out. Now, it's just based on the context of the game itself, where you can use either the environment or what other means. So I can't sit here and say like all are the same versus versus a lot of them just sharing the same type of gimmick.
Yeah,
It's just
yeah, but like
contextually
with
speaking.
for like Outlast, for example, right? Like you don't have like say, I don't know, like a rock or any kind of throwable item to throw off your pursuer, do you? To make them go look at a different direction while you try to sneak off.
No,
Like
you
you
gotta
don't
use your
have
wits
anything
with
to
it.
really like kind of you really only are just doing, let me just try to yeet this enemy. You're not like trying to like basically block off their path from chasing you or like lead them astray to a different area so that way you can go run off. It's nothing like that. It's just basically, how can I run past this guy without him seeing me, or at least run past him to the point where he'll stop chasing me because it's, scripted for him not to chase me past this point.
Yeah, and that's something that something like Haunting Ground or Clock Tower does really well, where they have points you can hide in, and then after a while, the enemies will sort of like pick up on your hiding spots, and they get you out of them, which is pretty like horrifying the first couple times it happens. But yeah, after a while, that does dry up as well.
I know, like with at least Clock Tower 3 in particular, they added the sanity meter. So, like, if your character is like freaking the hell out, like hiding isn't really going to do a whole lot.
The sanity meter honestly sucked a lot, but we'll get on that other topic.
Can you, speaking about like hiding from an enemy and just doing that the whole game, can you imagine like how scary a game will be where the enemy starts learning about like what you do? Like, for example, all right, I'm gonna chase him off and then I'm gonna hide in this closet. All right, the guy now knows that, hey, you disappeared. But what if the AI of the enemy starts learning and saying like, hey, he hid in that closet like 5 minutes ago. Maybe he's in another closet. I'm gonna check here. And the AI of the enemy starts learning and learning and making the game more difficult because it's a stalker that is basically, well, getting better at stalking.
I know it's not a run and hide simulator, but isn't that something that Alien does?
Yeah,
Alien Isolation. Yeah.
Yeah.
So Alien Isolation, because I actually played through it on the hardest difficulty. The whole gimmick with that game is that aside from the androids, when the xenomorph is chasing you, you can hide into lockers. Granted, you have means to defend yourself, but like when you're running from the fucking xenomorph, you're only equipped with the gun. You don't even have the flamethrower yet. You don't get it till like way later in the game. So you have to basically hide all the way in the back of the locker, and there's like a way to like make the character go back. You have to hold your breath, which I think the character can also like like let go after a certain point and start breathing heavily, and that's how the xenomorph will know. And it'll start inching up and trying to like hear you as you're in the locker too. So at least in that game, it's technically done, but maybe not to the extent that some other people might want, where it's like, oh, maybe I should, where it's a little bit more frequent or a little bit more smarter, I guess. I don't know.
It's been done, but it hasn't been done like the extent of what's being talked about here. Like in general, if we were to say that a game has done like learning patterns where an enemy would follow your every move, and if you do something repetitious wise, you'll get spotted. I think something was like that in Batman Arkham City, where you fight Mr. Freeze, and if you do the same thing to him again, he'll try to cut you off some way, so you can't use that venue anymore. I would like to see that in a horror game, but right now I can't think of a very distinct one that does what Byrne is talking about.
I want to throw off one more point to kind of add on really quick. I think it'd actually be really cool is if, like, say if you had a pursuer that decided, well, I know that this character or this player is basically going to hide in a locker or underneath the bed or something like that, right? So what if I hid in the next like likely place they're going to hide in to basically throw them off, where like you try to hide and you see them and they're like, oh, hey, how's it going? I'm here to kill you. So I don't know. I think like something like that would be pretty cool.
I think it's worth noting how, like, in the course of the discussion, we've already started bringing up games like Arkham Asylum and that sort of thing, because I don't think there isn't that many games that I can think of that really have ever done this concept that well. I think is kind of the problem in the survival horror genre. In isolation, you mentioned. You could maybe mention perhaps RE7, though it's a bit loose. Outlast, fine. Evil Within, maybe. I don't know. I think this already goes to show that it's not something that's really worked well. I mean, I think of like a run and hide simulator, and like a good example of it, I think it's like Dead by Daylight. Now, again, we're kind of going outside the context of survival horror games, but it can't be denied that it does the concept well. And I think it goes to show that maybe it just, like, it's so strange. Like, in theory, it should work well. It's almost like you're playing a movie. You're playing as the the person who's completely outmatched and has to kind of use your wits to outsmart the enemy. But it just never seems to work particularly well, I don't think. And whether that's because maybe the AI is just super hard to program in a way where it makes logical sense. Ultimately, something like Dead by Daylight, I think the reason it works is because you're going against someone else who can learn patterns, who can establish things that people do and don't do, and can react accordingly. Whereas something like to write an AI script, it's incredibly difficult to do that, and for it to feel kind of like organic. I think this goes to show the problems that this sort of splinter of the genre has.
Yeah, I definitely agree with that.
I agree.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, I think that's the reason why you see a lot of the run and hide simulators in the indie game, in the development.
It should definitely also be noted that there are absolutely tons of indie games out there. There are going to be some that will get it done pretty well, but unfortunately, the vast majority are either going to be rehashes or just fairly not very good implementation.
Yeah, like mimicking PT a lot.
Yeah, a lot of PT, Allison Road, stuff like that.
And that was a huge problem. Like, basically, that happened as soon as PT got canceled. Like, every indie dev and their mother wanted to make their own version of PT
because it was an open market. People looked at them for they were just looking and seeing dollar bills. We've mentioned this on previous podcasts, and everyone jumped in on it. But then it oversaturated everything, and then
and nobody ever thought like, hey, maybe this isn't exactly what Silent Hills is going to be to a T, because even like when Kojima and Productions was talking about that at the time, they were saying like it was going to take elements from all the different Silent Hill games, good and bad. So
I mean, basically, PT became its own genre.
Yeah, but it pretty much became its own genre, for better and for worse.
Yeah, but I think this goes, like much back before, from games like Amnesia and Penumbra, the hide and the run and hide simulator. I think that game is what spawned all the indie games that try to copy that, because it's something it's cheap to do this. You don't have to work so much, for something that you guys were proposing, where you had machine learning AI. So yeah, and because there's not much creativity, it's easier to copy something that's already made.
Yep, I am in 100% agreement with that one. I think it's just easy to do. I wouldn't say like I'll say that I enjoy Outlast for what it was, but it is one of those things where it's like, well, I wish I had like maybe something to lure or distract enemies or like some kind of weapon to do something. But yeah, it's cheap to do. You don't have to spend like extra data worrying about people getting shot and reacting to it. I think that's a lot more precise with the things you have to do. And yeah, it's just one of those things where it's like it did get oversaturated for a while with the whole PT boom. I just wish that maybe it was a little bit more creativity than just the looping door room that everyone wanted to recreate over and over and over. I will respect people that at least tried to make their own game from that gameplay style. And that's about it for me.
By the way, Amnesia sucks. Don't at me.
I haven't.
Yeah, I mean,
I haven't played it, so I can't say.
Either love the run and hide simulators or you hate them. It's kind of
it's there's just not enough strong examples of it for it to become like a really defined, like accepting the thing. Like there are examples where it's worked, and there's plenty of examples in games for it to work within it. But a game truly fully based on that, like there's very few examples of it succeeding particularly well.
But I'm more down the middle of that because I don't like or hate it though. I just go by game. Like again, I like Atlas a lot, but I don't like Amnesia. People love Amnesia
as well. But certain games they do it certain things well, but again, like none of them are super strong. Where it's like they just have a lot of weaknesses in the setup.
I think I've talked about it in past podcasts from like years ago, but like just to kind of reiterate that point, like my particular issue with like these types of like horror games in particular is that like it basically is there to cater for the lowest common denominator, the casuals, right? They'll look at it and be like, oh, it's that scary game that said insert YouTube or Twitch streamer played, right, and screamed their out of the like top of their lungs, right, like set during their streams or whatever. And my kind of issue with it is that it's like because of the trend and how many games we got out of this, at least from the indie scene, at least there's a lack of variety within the genre, and I think like it's very limiting because when you see some actual new and interesting ideas for survival horror, it kind of gets drowned out by what most people want to play, at least in the casual side of things, and it's kind of unfortunate.
The misconception with that sort of thing, of course, is you're not necessarily watching it for the game; you're watching it for the reaction. And I think this is a bit of a misconception that people miss more often than they realize, and that, I'm not saying it's not a criticism of the game, but it's something that has to be borne in mind in a conversation like
this. Yeah, I think a good combination will be this run and hide simulator kind of thing, and you combine it with some type of combat system where you can actually fight back. I think that's actually what could work really well. That's actually what we're trying to do with our last project.
I think even the guys who made the Medium Bloober team, they said that they're gonna make horror games with the concept of fighting back because the Medium did not have it. So it's interesting to experiment. I would say if people feel creative enough to do a horror game, then if they want to implement more complex systems and they have the ability, then that should be 100% warranted.
Yeah,
but
definitely.
I think we should probably move on to the next one if anyone wants to pick one from the raffle.
I'll pick one though, and with this question, I'm gonna add in a sub question with it.
All right.
Stamina meters. A bar that causes your character to be fatigued after a certain period of time if you drain it. How you guys feel about this mechanic in survival horror genre? Also, I'm gonna add in something else. How you guys feel about alternative mechanics that will mess with the players, like say control or anything else? For example, in Clock Tower 3, I believe, the sanity meter. That when the meter goes to, I think, maximum or near max, your character will enter like a panic attack, and your control over the character will be very worsened than usual. Like when you try to tell her to go straight though, she will start going left and right, or we try to do an action though, she won't do it, and among other things. How do you guys feel about those mechanics in survival horror games?
As I said in
Well-
chat, I swear that happened in Eternal Darkness as well.
Yeah,
Yes.
it did.
Yeah, that was based off.
Yeah.
I think as far as stamina idea, it's the whole principle of trying to like limit the player and kind of hindering them so they don't feel too powerful within the bounds of what they're trying to do. And also survival horror games, not all of them, but some of them try to kind of act almost a bit more realistically than some of the other genres, which of course there's an irony of, because the whole concept of what you're doing in half these games makes absolutely no logical sense whatsoever. But it's the whole principle of trying to obviously limit what the player can do, and so you don't just feel like you're a god amongst men. So I think it feels like more of a necessity nowadays, more than anything else. It feels like if you got a survival horror game, you're gonna have stamina of some kind or another almost always. So it's a bit more picky and choosy in the early days, but certainly now, like it feels like if you've got it, you have to have something, because otherwise it feels like there's almost automatic criticism otherwise, because it's like, when people are unnatural and and you're like, what are you doing?
I honestly, I do not disagree with that notion. I mean, sorry, agree with that notion. Why? Because let's look at Resident Evil. The player only feels powerful based on the equipment you have in your inventory, not because of me running for 5 seconds and being tired. Yeah. Now, the reason why I don't like the stamina gimmick though, because one is overdone, and a lot of other games outside of genre also utilizes the mechanic. But I feel like if you really want to limit the player or something though, I feel like other ways of going about it is not limiting you based on your stamina. Because
I was gonna say I don't particularly like it either, to be brutally honest. I don't
Yeah.
think it's aged. It's something that made perhaps sense 20 years ago, 15 years ago, but I don't think it's aged at all well. And it's kind of
Yeah,
one of
I
those
totally
artifacts of the
agree.
past that have kind of been incorporated into games as we've gone along. It was a way of trying to assert some control of the player, but I think nowadays it's like, unless you're playing like more of a survival simulator sort of style of game, I think it's more of just an inconvenience and a hindrance nowadays.
Well,
Yeah,
I
because
was gonna say that it in most games that I've seen it doesn't even really like slow you down for that much of an amount of time, where it just builds up again so fast, or it just makes you a little slow for a little while.
well, it does
where it's
depend
like
on the
barely
game too.
noticeable.
It does.
Yeah.
Because
Yeah.
Evil Within, like when you
Yes.
run out of stamina, you just dead stop. Like Sebastian takes a breath, and you're stuck in that animation for like literally like a couple of seconds.
Yeah,
That
no
was
stamina
addressed
runs
in,
are horrible. When you try to do what was it? Classic mode or Kuma mode in the first game we tried doing the upgrades.
Mhm.
Like it's horrible. Like we're trying to run away and then you stuck in dead spin and boom, you're dead. Like it's not a fun experience to deal with.
What I never
the
understood.
first game did it like really poorly as well, because like the second game they reintroduced the stamina mechanic, but then they added in a feature where you could just keep mashing X when you're about to run out to like refill up to a certain point much faster than you otherwise normally would if you just let it go on its own. So
And I think the issue is as well is that because then as it infringes upon the player, your attention then just starts focusing almost solely on it, and you stop becoming scared to do things, and it's like, if I do something, I can only do it for so long, and it kind of takes, I think it takes people out of the experience of being in the game, in the world, and in the moment, because you're just worrying about looking at a bar and thinking, when's it going to run out? Which
Yeah.
is,
Yeah.
I think, pretty disastrous to your game design. That's not what
Yeah.
you want people to be doing.
Yeah,
So-
I think
Oh,
I
go
think
ahead.
the developers kind of integrate those mechanics because they think it's going to be more immersive. But I think that at the end it could damage a lot. I find it like very similar to the problem with the flashlight with the batteries. They run out and you're pretty much fucked. So
Hmm.
it becomes annoying, I think.
I think what it essentially boils down to is, and I kind of said this in chat as well, is that it's an attempt to have a lack of control, or giving the player a lack of control, which to a degree it makes sense. You know, you're playing a horror game. You're not trying to give the player like tons of ammo and resources and stuff like that. But then there are things where it just kind of doesn't make sense, or doesn't really need to be there, in terms of just taking away a form of player control. I'm like indifferent in terms of a stamina meter, but I don't think that I would. I don't think I'd really care if it was gone or not in a survival horror game. However, the other point with the sanity meter, for example, I think like stuff like that could work very well, but it just needs to be worked on more heavily, because we haven't really seen it a whole lot, actually.
Yeah, I think that for most games, I would probably ditch the exhaustion meters and a lot of those things, unless it's like more event based, because sometimes that's like, you know, a good breakaway of just the like, oh, my flashlight ran out like at a certain part, where being like in the dark or something like that will like add to that part of the game, or like a certain enemy that it like clicks with really well. But just having it like throughout does really take away from the experience for a lot of games. And definitely like with something like the sanity meter, a lot of the time it just comes in like intermittently, where if it does like totally like have like end up in something where you would have like that like panic, and you just either run around until you calm down, or you could take like, I think in Haunting Ground they had a couple of the like calming like items that you could use that could make it stop. But
Yeah, I
like
mean,
some of
like I
those,
think
Haunted
like,
Ground did better than 3.
yeah, then Clock Tower.
I
But
think like in terms of a sanity meter too, like kind of just going off of the idea of eternal darkness, where the game just starts fucking with you by throwing
yeah,
things around, or like doing things that like make you question whether or not it actually happened, or start like, you know, the infamous, oh, it's gonna delete the whole like game files and off your memory card, right?
yeah,
That type of thing, where I think they could implement that in a way where maybe you start seeing things, maybe you start hearing things in game, or certain things just kind of start looking a little different than they normally would. Stuff where maybe it's going to get the player to question what's going on in the game, rather than just being like doing something that might have worked maybe say 10-20 years ago, that probably is just going to be seen as like very cheap or very predictable in the modern
and
day.
that was something for like Eternal Darkness, where sometimes it would randomly happen if your meter wasn't even that like depleted. So that was something where it just seemed random for different levels. There was one level in particular where it seemed to happen a lot more, and that level was also one of the levels where they had an area where you could refill it, and you can go back to that area a couple times. So I think that was also just like something that throughout the game just made it different. But in that game, it definitely did have, when you were missing like a small chunk, sometimes you'd wander into a room and the walls would be bleeding a little bit or something. And they definitely had a couple of moments where you would walk into a room and you would like fully walk into the middle of the room, and then all of a sudden like your character, like something like either like your arms would start falling off, or the character would like die like in some like really violent way, and then you would end up back in the previous room as if you had never gone into that room. So it's just like a total like break. And sometimes your meter didn't even have to be depleted or that far down for it to happen. So it was kind of interesting, but definitely something that if they had had some different breaks per level, or something that made it like a little bit more random, and they like either wouldn't repeat them, so like maybe there would be like a list that the game would keep track of like on its own, that, oh, you already got this one, like let's not do it again. Might be like a way that they could kind of take the like, okay, like how many times am I going to walk into a room and explode before I you know, get sick of it.
Yeah. So these are like like fast meters, right? Something like that. What about something that's more like more long? Like I don't know if you guys played Resident Evil Outbreak. That game you could actually get infected.
Oh, you
Have,
mean
like,
the virus meter?
And lots and lots and
Yeah.
lots and lots and lots and lots and lots.
In context of that game, though, that is used to stop, like, to force players to finish your job quickly and get out of the server. Because at the time, though, we didn't have like very strong servers, at least for Capcom. So like, they wanted you to actually beat the game or just die. You know,
It's a time
not
limit.
clutter up. Yeah.
The time limit is effectively
But-
what that is.
If they bring that back, personally though, they have to do it right. Because we do have items that can like slow down like or stop poison altogether, right? So like
Yeah.
if they implement like something like that, like combine viral sample to like slow down the progress of your virus infection, like I think that would be neat so long as it's done right.
I mean, in the context of Outbreak, that's exactly what they did.
yeah,
So-
I mean, no, I'm talking about like ignoring like the online portion. I'm talking about legit like in another Resident Evil game, like a main. Like say Resident Evil 9, they bring that back as a full-on mechanic for story context rather than just stopping you from playing the game for too long. So I know it's done in that game though, but I'm just strictly talking about feature games.
Yeah.
Mm,
All right, anybody else?
I was gonna add on real quick. Did we talk about consumables and those having like slowdowns and meters like batteries? Because I like stepped out for a second.
Well, consumables. No, I don't think we did.
Yeah, that's kind of like also a little bit annoying too. I don't want to like diverge too long on that. Just I prefer it where it's like Silent Hill. You have the flashlight for strategy, so if you want to turn the flashlight off and you manage to run around a monster, they possibly can't see you. At the same time, you probably can't see as well. So it's kind of like a 50-50 where you do have these mechanics in play and you can use the flashlight for an unlimited amount of time and it can work in your favor. At the same time, it will obscure you a little bit and it will obscure the monster as well.
I think you should have saved that for number 8 because that's number 8.
What's number 8? Limited. Well,
Number 8 is limited vision.
Well, I was just talking about like I had to sort of side diverge because we're talking about batteries running out, and Silent Hill is just a good example of that.
Well, yeah, I'm freaking Outlast technically does this as well with your camera. So you need to go into night vision to see it in the darkness, right? But it depends on the difficulty and how many batteries you can carry and how quickly the battery will drain. Like I mentioned, on insane difficulty, and I think Nightmare as well, you only can have 2 batteries, 2 spare batteries, so a total of 3, 1 in your camera and 2 extra. Once you go in night vision, that battery drains really quickly. So you have to, by that point though, it's like a game of memorization. You have to know where to go and when to use your night vision. Because there will be like little obstacles that will block your way. Now, I don't know any other game that does that as far as like consumable batteries.
Yeah,
That's
me
my
neither.
recollection.
That's the only one I know is Outlast. Plus I guess we can move on to number 8 because it's a lot more with Silent Hill than just like the flashlight. There's also the fog.
I think at some point I haven't played them in a while, but doesn't Fatal Frame has like kind of the same thing where if you run out of film, like you are defenseless against the ghost?
Yes. Yes, once you run a film, your defense is against the ghosts. But it might be depending on the game. But yeah, certain number 2, I believe, have like special film where it can give you other properties. Or that might have been 3. My membership.
There is Fatal Frame games where you get unlimited filament. I just forget which is the one that gives you that. But I do know there is one where it's like you can just use it whenever, but it's super weak.
Oh, all right.
But let's move on to number 8. So limited vision. Sometimes things can get a little dark in the environment, which can obscure our vision. You can either pop on circuit breakers or gain a flashlight, which could come in handy. How do you feel about limited vision in video games for horror? I pretty much don't have a problem with it as long as it's not too dark where I have to adjust my TV settings in order to see something.
Oh yeah, if it's like that dark, that artificially dark, I don't want that. Cause I would still like to see the floor. Cause God forbid, no, there could be a zombie on the ground. I couldn't see it.
It's not something you
Sure.
you can base a game purely on. But I think as like in limited uses in specific areas, like I think you can definitely it's something you should be using because it's taking people out of their comfort zone and it's trying to almost like to try and set up situations so you can ambush the player. Which makes logical sense.
Oh, and actually, I know a
So-
perfect game for this. Invader Studios that made Daybreak, was it?
Daymare.
Yeah,
Daymare.
they made a Resident Evil 2 remake themselves, right?
Mm.
The demo they showed off though is a perfect example of a game being too dark. Because even when you turn your brightness on, like YouTube or whatever, it's almost too hard to see what's going on.
Yeah, I think they addressed the issue to a degree with Daymare. I mean, Daymare is still pretty dark, but for the most part, they did listen to the feedback of like everybody saying like their fan RE2 remake was just way too dark. I was gonna bring up. I was actually gonna bring up 2 points. As far as like lighting goes in a survival horror game, I would actually like to see more of a push for RTX in these types of games. Those and stealth games, although that's a completely different topic. Only because lighting is so key in a survival horror game. So I think like you could really make some well lit rooms, but also some very dark and atmospheric rooms as well that would work well with with an RTX feature. The second thing, and I'm surprised not many of you have brought this up yet, weather. We don't see a whole lot of weather in survival horror games, and yeah, we've talked about Silent Hill with fog, but how about like Extermination with the snowstorm, or how about Cold Fear where it's constantly raining and you're in the middle of a sea storm, stuff like that. I think that would be a really cool way to like to diversify in terms of like the style.
A lot of horror games do have weather. It's not the main focus. Right?
Yeah, it's not the primary focus, so they don't really.
So
like,
that would
make
be a
an
nice change of
emphasis
pace.
on it. Yeah, so it's like
I guess it depends. Like for like if you were in the middle of like a wildfire, that would be more unique. But I think a lot of games have like rain and thunder, where it's like the
a lot
middle
of
of a
games.
storm.
Yeah, a lot of
the
games
game.
rely on like rain, but a lot of the
Yeah.
time that rain just ends up going away after a few hours or maybe like just an hour, right? Whereas like I brought up Cold Fear and like even Miranda's talking about it, where like you're in the middle of a sea storm, so like you're on a ship and it's constantly swaying with like all these waves crashing onto the ship and everything, and it's very poor and low visibility. So I think that would be a really interesting way to like change things up. Same thing with like I brought up Extermination. Extermination, you're in the middle of a blizzard in like I think it's in the Antarctic.
Yeah,
So
I think a lot
you
of
can't.
different games use cold weather as well, where you're like stuck in the woods, or like Code Veronica goes into the Antarctic specifically again, or something like a Strange Journey if you count that one.
I think also, well, originally wasn't RE5 going to use the elements of sunlight against the player?
Yeah, like a dehydration.
Yeah.
But you know what? Like imagine if we had a survival horror game set in like some kind of desert environment where you could just have like a random sandstorm occur.
Metal Gear
Or,
Solid
like,
5?
maybe the sandstorm is like Yeah, yeah, or like maybe the sandstorm is like just a never-ending thing, right? And you're stuck in this horror situation where you have to navigate through a very, very low visibility like terrain and whatnot.
Yeah.
In a
Well,
horror situation, I think that'd be pretty interesting.
yeah, why not? These games are survival horror though. A good example to take inspiration from really would be like say Uncharted 3 when you're stranded in the desert, or Metal Gear Solid 5 because they handle like the sand environments pretty well. So yeah, that should be nice in a survival horror game. But
Yeah, I
also,
think
I'm gonna
Sorry, go.
point out too, like let's hope that Resident Evil 8 has like a snowstorm type thing coming in.
Oh, dude, that'd be really fucking dope if Village had that.
I can definitely see it happening. Like I think it makes sense. The problem is that I think a lot of the time these kind of these sort of concepts they do get used in games, but it's only generally for like kind of as gimmicks for a certain area or a certain period.
Yeah, that's what I was
Then
thinking
you
too.
know, I mean, I know example. Let's say Left 4 Dead, for example, with Hard Rain. You know, they've got a campaign based around the fact that the rain gets worse and worse as you go, and it starts infringing later on. But like you can do it for short sections, but to like try and span that over the course of maybe hours, I think you start kind of risking to kind of tire out the player and to kind of it loses its charm, you know, from what is kind of a cool game mechanic if you only play it for maybe 30 minutes or an hour. What if you start extending it to sort of 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 hours? That can become a bit of a drag, and you start kind of losing the focus of why it's there to begin with. It's just there for being there, rather than kind of serving the purpose that it's been put in for the first place.
I think, well, like with that regard, like I think it just varies because like if you can have a interesting setup for it, right, and a logical reason as to why it's happening, right, a strong reason too, it could work well. I'm not saying that like every single game should, obviously have weather effects. Some games are just perfectly fine without them. But I think as a nice change of pace, to do weather effects that we don't often see in survival horror games would be pretty nice.
Yeah,
Just
yeah,
as a nice
that
change of
has a
pace.
place, and it's an underutilized mechanic, but it's open to being overexposed very easily. Is the danger? And once it's overexposed, that's it. It's just kind of gone, and people start hating on it very, very quickly. So it's got to be used.
Well,
It's got to be used in
just as a
moderation.
counterpoint to that, though, it's like you could really look at anything like that. Like take a look at like
Yeah, I mean,
open
at least
world,
so.
right?
At least so. I agree.
Yeah, like take a look at like open world, or even like how we talked about first person horror games, right? Like both of those things like essentially went overboard with that stuff, and now with like almost every game is either open world, or a lot of horror games are starting to go for more of that first person route rather than trying to
Yeah.
experiment with new types of ideas. So
Yeah,
so you could really
I'll
make
agree.
that argument for anything, at least in my opinion. But
I agree, but I think something like this is open to that level of overexposure. I think more than some of the things. But I agree. Obviously, everything has its limits, of course.
So are we ready to move on to the next one?
Yeah.
Sure.
Then who wants to read off a question? Somebody has read before. What about you, Black Shadow? Want to read off a question?
You had to do it the moment I've accidentally closed down my list, and I don't know where I've put it. Hold on, someone else, please. I'll do the next one.
Okay. Lily, you want to read off a question?
Oh, I know. I was just looking at the list, trying to pick one. Does anyone
Here
have
we
one in
go.
mind?
I've got lost. I suppose I'll throw up the one that I mentioned, which is the use of backtracking in games. Obviously, I think it's something that's. I mentioned this earlier. I think it's another one of those things that have kind of been used a lot in older games because you only had limited environments. But I think it's interesting nowadays how games I think try to approach it, which is why I mentioned it.
I have a love-hate relationship for backtracking in video games, especially horror ones. Now, I don't mind when they try to do things like populate the area with new enemies, or they might have like a door or a gate that you couldn't access with the previous character. We saw a lot of this in Resident Evil Code Veronica X, where there's areas where Chris obviously could not get to originally, or Claire, and is vice versa. So I do appreciate the element of putting in new enemies and trying to make things fresh, but you are going through like the same environments, just something might be broken, a mainline pipe might be destroyed, and there's another side that you spawned on as opposed to the previous character. So it kind of creates this thing where there's not a lot of visual variety, and that's kind of a little bit disappointing in my opinion. At the same time, I do like it when they try to either change the environment so much to the point where it's completely unrecognizable. Like I saw this with like psychological horror games where it's a lot of stuff with the mind screwing with you even if you're going through a previous haunt.
I
Actually,
will give
Ren,
Code Veronica. I'll give Code Veronica a degree of defense that there is at least some. I mean, there's more variants of Code Veronica than there's given. Both with
Yeah,
the
that's true.
military base, because the place has been blown up to some degree. So there's several areas that you obviously can't access. There's also quite a few have changed. The Antarctica, you know, like again, it's the idea of giving the player the feeling that the actions they're taking at the time has consequences. More often than not, you don't see them. You know, and you go to the Antarctica, for example, where you bust your way out of the base, which ends up freezing and flooding half of it. And then when you come with later on as Chris, you suddenly realize, good grief, I made an absolute mess in here, sort of thing.
That's true, but there is some rooms in that same base that is completely 100% similar, and they don't do much to change it. So it's certain like cases. This is a case by case basis, in my opinion.
Yeah,
Well,
I think the thing is, if you're gonna reuse an area and change it like almost entirely, you might as well just make a new area. The whole idea of it being an area you've been in is that you have at least some familiarity with going on, even if it's not quite what you expect.
Well, actually, get my 2 cents on this real quick. Capcom is probably arguably the best, and also depending on the situation, the worst when it comes to backtracking. Like with Resident Evil, especially the first few games, like once you go back to return to a old area, you're gonna run into like new enemies, and plus you probably get some new items on the way as well.
Yep.
So like it's not going to be the exact same experience. You are gonna have a new shift and change, but also depending on the game though, like the environment could actually look completely different as well once you return to the area. Case in point, let's look at the Democrat games, the first 3 games in particular. Once you return to an area, though, something could drastically change, especially in case of 3, when story context, when the tower shifts around, you could literally run into both new and old areas, or interconnect with old areas that should not be together because of how the story changed the settings.
Yeah.
So also on Onimusha, once you backtrack to a certain area, though, you're going to be running into like stronger enemies up to that point once you get to the story context of this setting.
Dead Space is another example as well for that sort of time era.
Yep,
Yeah,
exactly.
But
But here's-
game does that really well with the mansion, where you go back to certain parts.
But here's the problem: like, are those new elements good? Because I swear to
Yeah, I was about
God,
to get to that.
each and every single time for Code Veronica running into those stupid poisonous hunters in the middle of the military base, it is not fun in my opinion compared to the beginning of the game.
Yeah, I was actually about to get to that too. Like the worst examples, or at least the somewhat worst examples, would be Democrat 4 and also Code Veronica, and maybe Resident Evil 4, depending on you look at it. But in case of Code Veronica, they have respawning enemies, and unfortunately, 2 enemy types are poison. So you better be good at bobbing and weaving, like those damn butterflies or moths, whatever the fuck they are, and sweepers, I think, right?
I
That's what they
think
call it?
that's more choice of enemy, really, than like
Yeah.
they probably shouldn't have put those enemies in there, especially in some of the numbers they. I think that's more
Yeah.
that's the problem than the design.
Yeah,
of them.
but I think so. Like, you're gonna be going back and forth in certain areas naturally. So if you kill those guys and then come back and they're back again because they respawn, that could be kind of tiresome.
Yeah, it's not ideal. Again, it's the whole idea of, you know, if you're taking actions in an area and you're revisiting it later on, you want to feel like the actions you've taken have had an impact with the game. And that's very, very difficult to achieve pretty well, I think. There's not many examples, I think, that show that you've done it very well, because it's usually just, okay, you're here again. Now you have a new set of enemies, and it just spawns them all in. It doesn't.
Not
normally
true.
take
I
you
think
from previous-
the remakes round 1 and 2 do it pretty well, because once you return to the area though, like Lickers, for example, in RE2 will show up in RPD more frequently if you didn't kill them up beforehand. Like you could run into three in one room if you're reckless.
Yeah, I
Yeah,
think that some
very much
games
so.
do the environment of that really well. Like I was saying, Fatal Frame really like starts to get through that, where it explains that, you know, parts of the mansion are going back to like the way that they were like long ago, and just things that change, that oh, like now a hallway isn't like totally crashed in and you can get through, and you go through an area that is familiar into a new area, and you're always crossing through like the front part, and as you like go through the game, the enemies just increasingly get, you know, more difficult, where you're running into certain things in different places that you've been, or like overlapping into like places you've been, getting to new places, where you just have that like nice enemy progression throughout the game, even though it's an area you may have been through already.
Mm.
No, isn't Silent Hill 4 kind of the same way as well?
Yeah,
Yeah, a
because
little
I
bit.
think there's ghosts that only spawn during the second half of the game.
Yes, yeah, you have to revisit some of the areas you've gone specifically because you're trying to interact. Yeah, it does revisit it there to some degree, although I personally don't think it was the best example of kind of the revisiting. It to me felt a little bit kind of forced, although it made sense of the story context. Like to me, it felt a little bit forced upon the player, and it was a lot of work to do as well. But that's just me.
But even in 4, a lot of the time when you went to, you did go back to a level, but a lot of the time you would enter new areas in that level, and that would be again where you would be crossing into like maybe some of the initial rooms that you had started in the first time, but you'd be able to like get up some stairs or get around to somewhere where you weren't able to get into before, that expands the level, which is sort of interesting as well.
Yeah. It's not terrible by any means, but I feel like I don't know. It felt like it could have done a little bit more of it at times. It felt to me like it was kind of safe. It didn't really. It was kind of there and it performed a function and it made sense. But I feel like they could have done a little bit more of it. But that's it comes down to
Yeah,
personal
I
taste.
think that it's a game to game sort of thing too, of just how they incorporate it in with the story, because they kind of needed to go back to different areas for Silent Hill 4 specifically, just because of, you know, the ghosts are tied to certain places.
Yes,
So
they
with
had the choice.
that one makes sense for why they had to. But in other games, definitely it is like a resource play where they just didn't have the time to make the new environment, so they have you go back for whatever reason. But in some games, that has like a really nice feel, where like in Pathologic, you're in the same exact town and none of the environment changes the entire game, but you just sort of like get to know the town and where like people are, and it's the information that changes throughout the game, and just sort of like who you thought was a really like, you know, great person who was like helpful, and then, you know, you learn something about them as you like go through the story that's like, okay, they might actually be a little bit twisted, and I don't know how I feel about anything anymore. That sort
Mhm.
of like adds to the horror of like what choices people go through also throughout different games.
Anyone
Uh,
else?
yeah, anyone else? Going once, going twice. So to the goals and the red dress. Lily, what question you want to read off now?
Okay. I'm looking at ones we've. I just zoomed out the.
Pick a number, any number between 1 and like 6. I don't know.
Okay, so I'm gonna go with multiple endings. So
Okay.
that one, to start it off, I guess I've always really liked multiple endings, and just when they have either like any choices that are actually like meaningful in the story, where some games they add choices, and we talk about this a lot on my streams, of just how you have that choice where it looks like a choice, but then no matter which of 2 to 4 choices you pick, you end up getting the exact same text line at the end, where it's like you know, it's almost like a fake out where it's like, is that meant to mess with me in some way? Or did they just not have time to have it pull through? And then you'll realize in some of those choices that every once in a while, one of the four does change something and it'll, you know, come back to like which ending you're going to get, which some games, the endings, like, you know, you have pieces of them that you do feel like were fitting, but then sometimes you don't, and that sort of encourages you to go through and play again to get a different ending. And I don't know how anyone else feels about that. So
I mean, it has replay value, and plus, depending on the circumstances, though, it gives you a reason to find the canonical ending.
Yeah,
So,
it's pretty strong on a functional basis of what it actually manages to achieve. You know, and again, furthering sort of replayability. You know, as I've mentioned before, it kind of gives again more of this sort of impression of your actions having, you know, results rather than just kind of following along the script, of which there are many cases of video games where you have the illusion of choice, but at the end, the same thing happens pretty much almost regardless of what you try to do. And this is a battle that a lot of games have had to deal with. So yeah, functionally it
yeah,
makes it's very effective, but it is you know, and again, it's like it also can curate you know a bit of curiosity and thinking, well, what if? Which is one of those big things in games that you try to achieve is the what if thing, you know, and it gives some scope for people to kind of play around with things, think, well, you know, maybe I could do this instead, that sort of thing. You know, again, this is a very sort of thing that I think was very heavily used in the past because of limitations of media and what you could do. You know, and reusing content again and again and again. Whereas obviously nowadays people have a lot more flexibility in what you want to do with it, and you know, and it's used to very great effect in a lot of different mediums. But like, yeah, I think it's very good. It's worked well for survival horrors, and there's no reason it shouldn't. It gives you the impression of kind of cause and effect.
I think the way I mean, multiple endings are definitely okay, and I love the fact that of having to find different ways to like get more of them. But I think the game needs to do like a good way of doing it. For example, I don't know, maybe if this is just me. I don't know if someone else has played the Blair Witch game, which is kind of like an Outlast game. The way that the game makes the ending, there are like small factors like at the last part of the game that affect which version of the two different endings you will get. Like there are four endings, divided like in two and two. But during the whole game, there are a lot of special factors that you need to do to get one of those endings. One is a bad ending, the other is a good ending. I completed the whole game and everything, and I did everything as the game asked me to do it. And when I get to the end, well, it turns out that the way, well, not the game, well, yeah, the game asked me to do it. That way was actually the wrong way of doing it, and I got the bad ending. Turns out that I needed to do the opposite of what the game was telling me. And I think that on the context of the game, that you get to know this context like at the very end of the game, that's good. But for someone that is playing the game for the first time, you're like, wait, I got the bad ending? Why? Because you did everything wrong. Why? You told me to do that stuff. So I think that if they will have explained that a lot better, no problem. But I think the way that they explain it or the way that they manage all that made the way to get the endings a lot different than I thought. A lot, I don't know, useless, if I could say.
Silent Hill is a lot weirder with this premise because you have to do a lot to get some of the good endings from Silent Hill 1. You have to get the red liquid, you have to go and get the container in order to pick it up, you have to save Sybil, then you have to do the side mission for Kaufman. Not a lot of people are going to know that on their first playthrough when they go through that game. So I do think that it is good for replay value. It's really great, actually. on the context of like first playthroughs, you're gonna fuck something up definitely when you get to the end of the game if it's a fetch quest or if things are not too descriptive. Luckily we live in the age of the internet, so there's guides if there is multiple endings, or you can period trophies, so it's not that much of a big deal. But back then you definitely probably needed a strategy guide or something else to get you through, because there's a lot to take in for that.
Yeah, definitely.
So I think like we're talking about like multiple endings and like the subtlety of choice. Some of the things that I like about both the original remake, the remake, and of Resident Evil 1 and then Resident Evil 3, the original, is that they all had this thing of like every little thing that you would do kind of amounted to some kind of outcome, whether it be taking care of a puzzle in a certain order compared to like going through a certain room in a particular way, or saving your particular character over another, or completely just deciding to say fuck it and you're just going to save yourself. I think there needs to be more of like a subtle way to kind of approach how you're going to get an ending based on the choices you subconsciously make, whether it be going through rooms in a particular order, or taking care of a puzzle before you're supposed to actually do it, that type of thing. Because I actually really like the way that like say like RE1 handled it, where how you go through that game will ultimately change how you're going to see certain cutscenes or interact in the overall ending, right? Same thing with like RE3, except for at least in that game's case, it's a little bit more in your face with the live selection mechanics as well. So.
And it's a thing as well. It's like you think of the way it's done. It seems that also very, very archaic systems compared to some of the very sophisticated stuff you get nowadays. Yet it feels it's just as effective. Even now, people that play these games have never played them before, experienced these, and to them it's still fulfilling. Yet it's such an old school way of doing it, and it's so A or B. You've got games now that are designed purely upon the choices you make and trying to make gray and muddy the water sort of thing. So I think it's a testament to its power.
I think subtlety, and then also just the fact that like a lot of people will try to like, especially nowadays, like because we had the previous podcast talking about how people don't really try to give some of these older games a chance now because of them being more accustomed to more modern titles. But I think like when taking like that kind of design approach, it kind of leads into this thing of like sometimes something that might seem or feel outdated could be reworked to feel very well in a more modern aspect. It just needs to be done right by the right people, type of deal, if that makes sense.
Yeah, I was gonna say, I think that leading in from like the subtlety of like choices was definitely for like RE1, just whether or not you let a character die or not was something that was like pulled over from Sweet Home. But with Sweet Home, you just like as part of the course of the game, if one of your characters died, it was just whether or not you decided to continue to play the game without them. That was like one subtle like difference for how your ending was going to change and how like you would play the rest of the game without them. But
Isn't there
it's
like
definitely
5 different endings for that game too, based on like which characters survive and which ones don't?
Yeah, there are a few different ways that you can achieve different endings, and there's definitely a great like fake out sort of like ending where you kind of like have everything get turned over on you, and if you do save all the characters and you like do everything the way that you're like supposed to based on the notes.
I keep forgetting about like Until Dawn also as a horror game.
Right, also
Yeah.
Dawn's actually a perfect example of that because
Mhm.
every choice you pick has one heck of a consequence. Literally going one direction could get a whole character killed or change the ending completely.
Shoot
That's why I've been
Emily.
going through their new series.
Shoot
like,
Emily now.
No, no,
Like,
no.
the
I need
thing-
her to slap somebody. But go ahead though.
like with Until Dawn though, it's because we kind of brought this up earlier, it's one of those games where they're a little bit more in your face about the choices you have to make. So
Yeah, where the
It,
And
it
that's the
took
thing
more
with, like,
telltale.
that's the thing with like more modern games, right? It's where they're if they do have like some form of choice, they're more in your face about it. Whereas like a lot of these older like PlayStation 1, PlayStation 2, maybe even games that sometimes predate those era of console gaming, right? They were a lot more subtle about it, and they really try to make the player think about like how they're going to complete an objective or complete a game.
Mhm.
Yeah, that's what I was saying. I appreciate the subtlety that certain choices or things that you don't even realize that it was a choice at the time for like if you have an option of picking up two different items and you pick up one and you don't know that because you picked up that item, you can't pick up the other one and you wouldn't have known that. But it's just like one of those subtle ways that a game can kind of cow you into a choice without, having a giant like red text box pop up for do you want to, jump off this bridge or try and like, run through the monster like where sometimes those choices like having them presented in that way take away from the atmosphere a little bit. And sometimes it's also like a really like nice break where it's like, oh my goodness, like if I do one of these, like how is that going to affect the game going forward? Like if I do push him off the bridge or if I jump down, what's going to happen from that point? Is it going to be
Yeah.
a split? Are they going to like, like and of course like
RE3 did that really well. 'Cause
Yeah.
it was like a mix of having those choices in your face, but also having the subtle choices as well.
Mhm.
And that
It's like-
choice, yeah, that choice right there actually gets Nikolai killed in one of them. I forget which one it was, but I know Nemesis kills him if you do something different at that point.
Yeah, it's one of those things too, where like because we're talking about Nemesis, right?
Yeah.
Like if you go through like say the news building, right, the press building, how you meet Carlos can change too. Like you can meet him there as opposed to the restaurant. So like a lot of those things where it's like you can subconsciously make a choice, and it'll lead to like different outcomes in that story. And I think that is something that I would like to see in more modern titles, which we don't really get to see all that often.
Yeep. Shame that Remake 3 doesn't have it, but not part of this conversation. I guess we done here.
Yep.
Yeah, I could read off the next one.
Yeah.
Be my guest.
Okay, so I want to do number 4, limited ammo and resources. This is a trope that's extremely normalized in survival horror. You may be faced with situations where bullets or health items remain at bare minimum. I don't particularly have a problem with this. I think that this is like one way that survival horror stands out from other types of games in terms of how they challenge the players. Because you could have like an action game where an action game they might challenge you based on the amount of enemies you have to deal with or the circumstances as to how you're going to tackle a situation based on the scenario you're going through, right? You can have hack and slash game where the whole idea is to try to not to get hit, and that's part of the challenge, right? Whereas a survival horror game, you're constantly thinking about your resource management. You're constantly thinking about the amount of health items you have, the situations that are going to potentially get you poisoned or cause you to start bleeding or whatever kind of ailment that can occur within a survival horror game, right? So I think in that, with that in mind, like I don't necessarily have a problem with it, and I think that needs to be like a standard at this point, or it should be a standard. Granted, we do have action horror games which kind of deviate from that standard, but we'll get to that at a later point. So
Yeah, definitely. I think that having limited resources is a survival horror staple. Just anytime when you're running through one and you actually have run out of any like item that is necessary to get through to a next bit, that's definitely just whether you don't have like a key or it's that you don't have bullets because you either, were rearranging your inventory and forgot to put them back in, or you just straight up ran out. But any like moment where you don't have what you need is definitely like an extra layer in one of those games.
One thing I will add to this, so long as the limited resources are not goofy or clunky, like case in point, Evil Within, you see a big ass box of shotgun shells that holds at least like 8 to 12 shells, right? And you only get 2 out of the box. Like, no. That's Resident Evil definitely did that system better, where you get at least, depending on the game mode, of course, but you get like 12 bullets or 10, out of the case instead of just 2.
you usually get like say it's handgun ammo, you usually get 1 magazine worth of that amount, right? Or like shotgun shells, like if your shotgun holds up to like 6 rounds, you get about 6 rounds, right?
Yeah.
So, that kind of deal.
Yeah, I mean, for like original, like you would get 30, and then for like the shotgun, every time you got a case, you would get 12. So it was a bit much for some of like the early ones where you never ran out of ammo really, unless you only took so much with you. But usually you could stack it, so it was never that much of an issue. Silent Hill is the same way, where you pretty much always have 300 bullets on you, and it just kind of gets to be a bit too much in games like that. Where
Well, at least in Silent Hill's case, they kind of have more of an emphasis on melee combat.
Well, Silent Hill has
Yeah.
that thing where they do magic pockets where you can keep as much ammo and stuff as you want. Obviously if you play on hard mode, that sort of differs and it takes it down a bit. At the same time, there can be inventories where the system works against you. I think case in point was Silent Hill 4. Now I know some people might like this inventory system, but I personally do not, because I feel like with the way they set it up, it encourages you a lot to go back to the room constantly over and over to dump items because you have like limited inventory space. I think a good balance is really important for designing these games and making it where there's not way too many bullets, because it goes into the whole action horror question, which could be done for better or worse.
Oh yeah, that for Silent Hill 4 specifically, they did that to mess with you. They didn't want you to be running around holding all the items or to even pick up every item in the game. Like the golf clubs are straight up in the game to mess with you if you pick one up, because they break and then they're like stuck with you for a while. So it's definitely, or the doll, which totally is in the game 100% to mess with you. They almost want you to not pick up items in that game and to ignore them like almost exclusively, aside from like key items.
That's true, but it also increases the backtracking just a little bit, which is why I
But not
say
if you don't pick up the items, is what I'm saying. There are
Yeah.
a lot of items that I would just straight up ignore, especially like in a subsequent playthrough. It's like,
there's
I know
some
I don't want that at all.
there's some that's like you really need, like I'm talking about like the ghost killing weapons and stuff like that.
Yeah.
You do have to keep going back and forth because you're gonna want to need like those items right there, because they will start to hound you like much later in the game. So I would prefer if, yes, limited inventory stays and limited ammo resources. It makes these games very distinct. At the same time, I do feel like it needs to be just balanced out, because there's going to be some stuff you don't want. There's going to be some mechanics in there where they won't let you like discard things easily. I never liked that at all, where it's like I got to keep some junk or I get junk all the time. It's stuff like that that kind of drives me up a wall.
Being able to drop items is definitely like really useful for certain games. Some games it definitely can hinder you for a game like Pathologic, every once in a while, if your inventory is full of key items, someone will give you an item and it won't make the noise that the item, or you won't even hear it. So you won't realize that a key item just got dropped on the floor and you'll leave.
The only thing I don't like about item drops is when it's in stuff like RE0. I feel like that was not handled the best.
Oh my god, Zero's the worst offender of that.
Yeah.
They took that specifically from Sweet Home because they always try to like do as many throwbacks to that game as they could, and Sweet Home was one that you could do that. You could go to any point where there was an item and you could change it out of your inventory, because in Sweet Home your inventory per character was limited to 2 items, so you had to be really choosy with what you were taking in that, and dropping things was just a major mechanic in the game that they really wanted to use.
I appreciate
the biggest issue. I'm sorry, but the biggest issue with Zero's case is that it worked fine in the train because it's very linear and narrow, so you can find the locations of stuff that you had before, right? Now, and we get to the umbrella section. The area is so big that once you drop something, though, you better hope you don't need it later, because you're gonna be backtracking a lot just to get that one item, and God forbid you run into a leech man. Not to mention you need the hook shot, which is like, for some reason, the most essential item that you cannot find anywhere else again if you don't pick up the one somewhere else, you know? So like, Zero is like the worst case about it.
It is, but I think like the players when you play, I think have to sort of realize that it's going to be a mechanic, and the game does provide several kind of safe hub areas for you to manage your equipment as you go. And ultimately, there's no area that ever gets blocked off, at least. So it's not like you could drop something and then couldn't physically never get it back. So I'll give Zero a bit of defense specifically, because once you kind of realize that you're gonna have to manage your inventory in this way, I guess it comes to the fact I've played Outbreak tons, so an Outbreak, that's also a thing you have to do a little bit. You have to make decisions about what you do and don't want to take. Although the fact that with at least with Zero, the fact that there's items that you are going to need later on, but you don't know where on the first time. The hook shot is obviously an infamous example of, like, if you put it down in a bad place, then that's horrendous because you have to go back and get it, and you could have left it really bad. But once you realize to leave stuff in a hub area, it's not as aggravating. But I guess for people who didn't do that, then obviously it's gonna be different experiences.
I feel like it's just much of a danger because the health is not balanced out well between both characters, despite what you're carrying. Like I feel like because Rebecca has low health, you're gonna want her like in the background and not in the foreground, because if she gets hit too many times, she's dead.
Contrast to that, Billy cannot mix healing items for some reason. So like, if you leave Rebecca behind,
he's never seen the herbs. I think that actually makes some degree of sense.
That's kind of funny. That's so funny.
I mean, have you seen the herbs, man? Just crush them up and roll them up. That's it. Ain't that hard?
I actually don't think that works in context to the overall series, because you have dudes that go to like other countries and find herbs.
No, once you went beyond like Ari from Beyond, yes, it makes completely no sense. But at the time when Zero existed and it came out, it was defendable. I'll give it.
I don't think so.
I don't agree with that either.
Because like you also play as a fucking civilian in RE2. Clara, right? Which, yeah, you could argue, well, she was kind of trained by Chris, but she doesn't have the level of training that he has, where he went through, you know, the Air Force and
years.
Stars. So it's like he has years worth of training by the time she even gets some of the training that she got from him.
I suppose Claire is a reasonable thing to mention. Yeah, no, I can sort of see a bit of that.
Stuff like that, again, is something that Resident Evil took from Sweet Home, where each of the 5 characters, they have the lighter. One was a lock, you know.
Yeah, I appreciate the homages, but it just, some of it doesn't translate into good gameplay, in my opinion.
Yeah, but it worked really well for Sweet Home, and I think that was one thing that they had tried to emulate because of that, because they had a character who could cure anything, and that was probably like one of the worst like parts of that game, was anytime that you ever needed that character. But it definitely led to like some pretty diverse like gameplay, especially like when you would lose a character and you would have to use items, use and find, and you know, keep them around with the like mechanics of your inventory anytime that you lost one to be able to get through the game. It was definitely really interesting, and it worked well in Sweet Home, but of course, like when you carry it over to other games, you have to try and figure out exactly how it's going to work throughout. It's like how we were talking about how certain gimmicks, like they just get tiresome after a while, and it's something that they may not have wanted to require throughout the whole game.
Yeah, it definitely could have been some more forethought when really thinking about it. Also, I hate you guys posting the Wii images in chat.
Weed.
Uh, I know it's a bit divergent, but I kind of want to ask, how do you guys feel about like a bleeding mechanic in survival horror games? Because not too many
I
have them.
personally do not like it. Revelations 2 is actually probably the most richest example of it. Where even if you heal, you need bandages to get rid of the bleeding effect. Because if you don't get rid of bleeding though, your health will still drain over time. It's kind of like poison. I don't think it would kill you, but it still is an inconvenience mechanic where because the screen will have like these bloodshot effects going everywhere, and I cannot see shit. So like, and that actually got me killed more than once on multiple occasions during the campaign.
The only reason why I ask is because like the only three examples that I could think of off the top of my head, Revelations 2, which I do agree at least with the whole blood splatter that like on screen, that's kind of annoying. But two other games that had it were Operation Raccoon City and the first Dino Crisis. And I actually really like it in the first Dino Crisis because I felt like it made sense in the context of that game.
Yeah, Dino Crisis did it fine enough. Like it didn't like freaking obtrude my vision or whatever. So I could live with that. Because plus it's more comfy to find items that can heal the bandages. Also like Dino Crisis did it right at least. I get that much.
I would even give it a little bit of credit in ORC because it, at least in the context of that game, it kind of makes sense because it's more so if you sustain damage in the abdomen over a certain amount of time. And certain guns would be able to cause that kind of damage faster than others. And what that would do is it would attract more enemies towards said player or enemy, and could cause a player or an enemy to get infected, which I thought was a pretty interesting way to handle it.
Oh, also another game that did bleeding the worst was Atlas 2. Another reason why I don't like that game because it slows down your movement speed. So I don't think you can sprint, and you gradually it will kill you, I believe. So yeah, nah. Bleeding mechanics personally, I'm not a big fan of them. I'd rather not have it than to have it though. But if it be done right, more power to them.
I guess like kind of my mindset of it is like because a lot of people don't really see the point in like having a poison mechanic in like RE games, right? So I think like a bleeding mechanic to replace it would potentially make a little bit more sense. Because you're probably going to take more damage as opposed to getting poisoned. It's really hard to get poisoned in an RE game, right? But
Unless you
taking
call
damage,
Veronica.
of course, right? You're right. But most of the time with like most RE games, right, it's easy to take damage as opposed to getting poisoned. So at least in my mind, it would make sense to have some sort of bleeding mechanic, at least if it could be implemented right. And then just, at least replace those blue herbs with like the hemostat and bandages that they had in like the Dino Crisis series, or even like I almost forgot that Outbreak actually had a bleeding mechanic as well.
Yeah,
But,
it does.
was in
It's
that
got
game.
it has a bleeding mechanic. It's
Yeah.
you can generally you've just got to sort of stand in place well. But the thing is, at least it's not permanent. It's an inconvenience. It does affect like, some enemies will go for you, like the
The
leech man
leeches.
specifically. Will target you if you're bleeding, stuff like that. Which again is nicer as a gimmick.
That does make sense considering they like blood. So like,
Yeah, exactly. So it goes in context of what's going on. Which is nice.
no, if anything though, Remake 3 probably could have benefited from a bleeding mechanic then, because since they don't have blue herbs in the game, you cannot take advantage of the defense boost you get from combining all three or just the red and blue, like in Remake 2. So there's that. So anything else about it? Nope. Going once, going twice. All right, and so, all right. Who was real to the next question?
I can go since I hadn't gone yet.
Oh, Eli, you resist.
Yeah, technical issues on my end. I will pick action horror.
All right, go ahead.
Action horror is a subgenre that usually involves increased ammunition, melee, and a higher frequency of enemies. For example, Resident Evil 4 and Dino Crisis 2 can be considered as an action horror.
So, Eli, you want to go first, or let someone else take your turn?
I prefer action horror compared to like Winning Hide horror games.
Yeah.
I
Why?
I don't mind this genre. Now I know that's gonna get some flack because there's those people out there that's like, well, Resident Evil 4 is the worst piece of garbage ever made and it killed the series, blah blah blah.
Not even a horror game.
Yeah, it's not a horror game, but it is a good action game and it's something I enjoy playing. So it's an increased abundance of ammo. Enemies will drop it. There's a lot of enemies to keep the player on their toes. And, you know, sometimes there will be those creepy elements. Like, even though 4 is not a horror game, you can say the regenerators are definitely creepy, or there's elements of them actually trying to build the atmosphere with the prison later on in the labs.
Yeah, you can have your atmosphere or your creepy enemies though, but you know, as a whole, that's not enough for me to justify being called a horror game. Because I can say the same thing about RE5, you know.
Well, the
What do you
genre,
guys think it's?
the genre it spawned from is still definitely horror, and that's what they're trying to market it as. So, despite them not actually like referring to it as a straight up action game, it does have those action and horror elements blended in at the same time.
Yeah.
But I want to say that it's, as a genre, it can work, because I always see these opinions where people try to diminish the quality of these games just because all this stuff is happening. I will admit, in terms of a slower paced game, it's not ideal in my opinion. If you ask me anything, I would prefer Remake 2, but as games, I would prefer if they made Dino Crisis, for example, going forward as a fast paced game, because I don't think it fits the traditional Resident Evil mold anymore, in my opinion.
See, I'm like 50-50 with that. Like, just in regards to Dino Crisis specifically, like, so like, what I think would work is like having those survival like mechanics and whatnot, while still having like kind of like an action or like even action stealth sort of type of gameplay.
Yeah, that
'Cause I don't
mind actually. That's cool.
Because I don't think like keep in mind, I don't think it's bad for Dino Crisis to go in the action route. I understand why people prefer it in that way, and a lot of other Capcom franchises, they started more like scaled back because they were originally, you know, RE games or games that were taking a lot of inspiration from RE. This is how we got, you know, things like Onimusha, the original Dino Crisis, Devil May Cry, right? And then they all kind of went into their own style, right? Onimusha went into its own style, Devil May Cry went into its own style, Dino Crisis kind of experimented with its own stuff as well. So in that regard, I think it part of the issue might be is like a lot of people had an issue with the original Dino Crisis being like, well, this is Resident Evil, but with dinosaurs, right? So if they were to make it more like, say, RE6 or even RE5 or RE4, people would just be like, well, this is Dino Crisis, or this is like Resident Evil's 4, 5, 6, but with dinosaurs, right? So to make it a little bit more different, you know, try to have like more stealth action type of gameplay and more survival mechanics where, you know, you do have to think about the resources that you're utilizing and whatnot. But you can still pick and choose when you want to fight and when you want to run, type of deal.
Yeah, something like Manhunt might be a good example of something like that, where it's got the stealth, you know, kind of options in there. And I guess also just on how we had talked about having enemies that would follow you throughout a path as well, had parts that were in there that had things to do with that. But yeah, that's another series that did things really different from what you typically see as survival horror, and had a lot of the elements, and then just a mashup of a lot of other things as well.
Also, just really quick too, I gotta say that since we kind of brought up RE4, I actually really like the games that kind of came after RE4, specifically like Evil Within and Dead Space, where they, kind of did their own thing with that sort of formula, and just kind of built upon it.
Yeah, especially Dead Space. That was more of a horror game. Actually, no, it is a horror game by comparison to Resident Evil 4.
What did you guys think of Dead Space 2? Since
I
that's
like
more
2.
action
2's the better
Really
game,
good.
honestly.
You think so?
Yeah.
Even though it's more action?
Yeah, 2 was a dope ass game.
I
Okay.
mean, I like Resident Evil 4 too, but
I like 2
yeah,
for
I
more
can see why
action,
some
but if I want a good scare, I'll go back to 1.
yeah.
One particular reason why I don't like playing as 1 anymore is really the control scheme, because 2 refined it to the point, and then 3 carried over. So it's kind of hard for me to go back to 1 where it's like kind of inverted in a way. So I'm like, yeah, nah, I'm sorry. I know I could learn it though, but I'm not that patient enough for it. Still love the game though. Don't get me wrong though, but just the control scheme.
I still need
gets
to
me
play
off.
3.
Yeah, 3 is a fun game. I do like it. If you do it though, I recommend playing in co-op because you get the better experience out of it.
I'll hit you up when I get there.
Hey, all right.
Hey.
I think all this has to do a lot with the limited ammo and resources too. Like because if you have too much of that, it then becomes a shooter, So
Naturally though, it is going to be a shooter anyway, considering how it was formed. Because even let's say the older Resident Evil games still could become a shooter once you just pack up a lot of ammo, which you could do naturally anyway once you know what you're doing.
Yeah, sort of.
Yeah, that's where like some games that branch out into just having a lot of different mechanics. Like Pathologic is, mostly like a first-person shooter if you're like just looking at a lot of the gameplay, but then you have a lot of other things that you can do, like looting houses, and just depending on like which character you're playing as, extra mechanics that can change things up, so it's not just as focused on the combat.
I've been wanting to get into Pathologic too, actually. I've heard good things about it.
Yeah, I was gonna say, I think that for the original, the first day is really unforgiving. So if you can get past the first day, the game changes a lot after that. But definitely with the pandemic, it's been really crazy. Like going back and playing through just a lot of the gameplay, like as like the town gets sicker and sicker, it's pretty crazy.
We got any more add to this one? Going once? Going twice? No? Okay. All right. I'm gonna throw a renegade and bone here. I'm gonna combine 2 questions. Psychological elements in survival horror games and jump scares. Do you guys think this adds to the genre or takes away, or what do you prefer over the other?
I kind of have a little rant about it. Not because I'm scared of them or anything, but I feel that jump scares, I think many people also agree with this, but I feel that jump scares are really like cheap. Like they are just a really cheap way to get into like a scare out of people playing the game or watching movies and everything. And I feel that when games overuse jump scares like a lot during a game, it just feels just like you kind of get used to it. Maybe that's the main reason why I don't like games such as the Five Nights at Freddy's games, because they are just jump scares all the time. Like I'm gonna get used to that anyway. But when, let's say, for example, a Silent Hill game gets one jump scare in one game, but just that one jump scare, you're not gonna expect that because you're playing Silent Hill. You don't get the idea that there will be a jump scare at all. That will actually surprise you. So I don't know. I feel that jump scares are something that has become really overused and has become really cheap. But I do think that maybe if developers start using them more sparingly, maybe 1 2 times in specific sections of games, maybe they can actually add to the gameplay a little bit, or to the storytelling, maybe.
Yeah, it's moderation, isn't it?
So-
That's what it comes down to.
I'm gonna partially disagree with you a little bit. Nah, jump scares I don't think is too cheap though, because if you're not going to see it coming though, that's when it's best effective. But like we said, like with movies though, movies are actually the worst example of jump scares because they use it all the time. In video games though, like when you're like distracted or you like multitasking doing something else within the confines of the game, a jump scare could happen though and will completely catch you off guard though. So it will vary. Whereas a horror movie though is a little bit more, I guess, straightforward because your attention to focus other on the movie rather than multitasking on other things.
I was gonna bring that up, because like I think, like just thinking about like the various horror games that are out there, like if you're just playing, and sometimes it feels that like take Run for example, right? And I don't mean this as like an insult, but just like take a look at like some of the stuff that he's played, where like he'll play like a horror game and while he's doing something, he'll just get caught off guard because like he wasn't expecting an enemy around a corner or something like that. And that wasn't necessarily a like programmed jump scare. It just happened just by natural cause and effect, right? So I think like jump scares like that work like effectively because again, it's not something that the developers were intending and putting in the game. It just kind of happened by sheer chance. So I think stuff like that works very well.
Yeah, I'm with you on that one.
Yeah,
I
I think
personally
that
don't like jump scares at all. But if they happen, like something that's unintentional, like I think that's okay. But I will very much prefer like a game that doesn't have jump scares and it's horrifying by itself, and that's something that's also more memorable because jump scares are something that it's something that happens in the moment and
I think there's a fair portion of people who want to experience those things and play these sort of games and watch these sort of movies because that's what they want. They kind of want to have that sort of jump scare. It is maybe almost like a bit of a cheap thrill, perhaps sometimes.
yeah,
But
probably.
yeah, I think it's fine. I think it's to be expected. Again, as I said, it's just moderation. You don't if the moment you start overusing it, it loses all power. If you only have maybe one or two in the entire thing of any kind of specifically that's set up for it, then it has the impact. But once you start doing it too much, then it's like anything, it loses all value and meaning, and then it just becomes a drag.
Yeah, that's
Yeah,
what I was
definitely.
thinking as well. Just having a limit on how many you have, or having some that, as we had said, like that are just, your own personal jump scare where the tension was building and you just jumped and you're like, oh, that kind of was a fake out. Yeah, mm-hmm.
I remember
And
that's like 50% of what Outlast is, just jump scares.
yeah, where it gets to be a bit too much after a while.
Yeah, after your first playthrough, like once you see everything coming, that's it. Like you can't get jumped up anymore. I mean, that's a natural anyway with most things though, but that's especially in that game's case because the best experience is your first experience. That kind of deal.
Yeah, some games are best playing once.
Sadly, yeah.
What about the psychological? What do you guys stance on that?
Would it be appropriate to bring up fear?
Yeah.
In terms of psychological elements,
Yeah, sure,
little
go ahead.
Alma stalking you through the game.
Everything to add to the conversation. Be my guest.
Yeah, sure. We've talked about plenty of games that are not exactly strict survival horror.
Yeah. Well, Fear, of course, it's a excellent first-person shooter that blends horror elements into the action.
I think Batman Arkham Asylum has psychological elements with the Scarecrow stuff, and then Arkham Knight with the again Scarecrow stuff, but also the Scarecrow dedicated stages that you get for the PS4 version of the game.
Ah,
So yeah, those uses psychological elements with it.
Yeah, I was gonna say I think that we haven't really touched on Parasite Eve and Galerians as series as well that have a lot of psychological elements of just things that are going on and happening with, the main character and not really knowing what they're getting into of
Yeah.
just as the horror unfolds. But
And
those two
Parasite
definitely.
also uses body horror, right? As well.
A little,
a little
bit, I guess.
Like
not-
strange goop amalgam or like
yeah,
horror.
I mean, there's elements of it. There's definitely things that kind of to kind of freak out the player. It's not like excessively huge, but there's elements of it around.
And perhaps with like the one major character in the first game, she goes through a little bit herself, but it's probably more subtle and more personal for whoever's playing it if they're reading her diaries and
Stuff like that. Yeah, definitely.
yeah, something like that.
Maybe one day we'll get that remake.
Don't remind me, please. I'm sad. I guess we could just go ahead and move on to the next things. Hey, Renegade, I'll let you be the guest of honors here.
Okay, let me see. So, trying to see here. What do we got?
Can you do 6 and 9 for me then? Because I think you can blend those together quite nicely.
Nice.
So,
Nice.
environmental.
Oh,
So, oh god, 6 and 9. Okay, so
You walked right into that one.
let's do this.
yeah, I did.
The topics are environmental traps and atmospheric sound design. Environmental traps are booby traps in the environment that can kill enemies or kill you, and sound design is like creatures like yelling in the distance or Mr. X stomping his giant feet. What do you think about stuff like this?
Actually,
And
I was gonna. Just quickly, I was gonna mention actually the Mr. X footsteps. That even when you're like just like some rooms apart, you start hearing the footsteps. Like I said at the beginning, and I'm like really like, oh man, and you start feeling like the adrenaline coming. Like, oh, I need to run, I need to run, I need to run. And I think that's a really good thing because not only is it giving you like a head up, telling you that, hey, the guy is coming for you, but it's also a good way to like really make you see like, all right, is he close? Is he far? Do I go out? Do I go the other way? Things like that. I think that's a good way for games to work with stuff to really make you feel like, all right, I need to listen if the guy is nearby, if he's far away, if it's safe to go out, if I need to make another route for the way that I need to go, stuff like that. I think for environmental sound, it's a really good mechanic that it's really well done. I haven't played a game where it's badly done, basically.
Yeah.
Okay, I'm trying to
Why
think. I want to go real quick. I don't mind environmental traps, especially when there's this sort of like cat and mouse game with you and the enemy. I think that's also good. Like Evil Within is kind of like this as well, where you can either use explosives to kill the enemy, or if you are not really too bright and you run right into them, you will also die as well. So I kind of like
You can
that whole
disarm them as well. And get
yeah,
parts.
and get parts. So that's like sort of a risk reward thing too. If you do it right, you get stuff for it, and I enjoy that. As for psychological horror, I would say that I really do love it. Silent Hill was something different. I really enjoyed what that had to offer. You know, bending the mind, bending the environment, making things all crazy for the player.
Yeah, I think for sounds, Fatal Frame did such a great job with the way that certain ghosts like echo. If you play a Fatal Frame with surround sound and you have like a speaker that's like near a hallway, sometimes you get a certain ghost and it literally echoes down your hallway, and it is just like the like craziest thing when you're playing like at night. The setting like can just like blow you away. And definitely anytime when they have any of the like little voice clips and you have like a major character who's giving some sort of narrative, but then you can also hear in the background some like sort of like whispering or like weird sounds that you're just like, yeah, that's not right, that shouldn't be there, what are they saying? But sounds like in that game like made the environment.
Yeah. Another game that had like very good sound design was well, all the games by what's this Bloober Team, I think. The game, the studio that made Layers of Fear. Those games have. I mean, I don't personally don't like them at all. Those games, but they have very good sound design. Another game I can think of, Dead Space. Those games will have like pretty cool design, sound design.
I feel like music, especially music and sound design, are like the perfect things that will make or break your game. Because for me, though, like this is me personally, I'm not a person that gets scared really easy while playing horror games, right? But if you have really, really good sound design and a good atmosphere, like that right there just gets me. I like tension more so than anything else. That get me immersed into the game, and also the music. Now the music can vary in genres because let's look at Parasite Eve. That's that's an RPG survival horror game, right? But the music in that game kind of engrosses you into the environment and the characters and whatnot, right? And also in contrast to like Resident Evil, where it's like it could vary as well though, but it could be like very like subtle music that's like I say Resident Evil 4, or it could be bombastic, in like other games. So that's my sense on it. Sound design, music makes or breaks your game.
PT had a really good sound design too.
Exactly.
Just the sounds of like the ambient noises in that house.
It's quite nice.
Mhm.
Shame we never got it. Konami.
Still sends chills up my spine, my guy.
It's not really Konami's fault. It was their license to give, and not. You shouldn't start a project on someone else's idea. They should have done their own project entirely, and it would have been a major success.
Just like Guillermo del Toro make his damn game.
Right. Hey Rand, did you mark out the stuff? What number 7 now?
7 and 14. We can combine those two.
7 and 14.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. Okay. So number 7, storytelling conveyed through notes. Yeah, it's a very common trope with survival horror games, but especially again Resident Evil stuff or like even Dead Space among the few. And another thing is amnesia story tropes, which I'm not sure how common that is because I don't remember a lot of them from the top of my head. So you guys will educate me on that.
Is one where they start you off. There are also some that are like a bit more subtle, where you just like learn a lot more about the player like as you go. But anytime that they have that, it typically works pretty well to like ease you into the game and what's going on, and just adds like a layer to the horror as you like realize that certain things are like potentially a bit off with stuff that you start to remember, or that you aren't really sure like how you feel about certain losses or something like that, because you're not sure if you're even really like related to what's going on as like memories start to twist. But yeah, storytelling like through notes is definitely like something that I've always felt is like a survival horror staple. Like the way that they can like really like subtly like just like add things. Like Silent Hill 2 has a good like area of like notes that you can like slowly find, and just like leads up to like a little bit of like the story, and it's just like those subtle like extra bits that you get in a game that really like tie it out, and you can totally miss it too. So it's just if you want that extra stuff, you can find it, and it's not like a forced like cutscene or something like that, where it's like obviously if they put the time in to make the cutscene, they're gonna force you to watch it. But if it's notes, like that's something that can go to the wayside, and they don't care as much if you see it. It's just extra for people who want to go through and find it.
So I actually have a point to make about this. So a lot of people really dislike the first Evil Within story, feeling that it was very and I personally didn't feel that way, just because I went out of my way to like read all the notes and pay attention to the various environmental details and whatnot. So to me, it felt like as though it made sense, but a lot of people didn't feel that way. So I think when it comes to like telling a story through notes, while that can be done in a very effective way, it can also lead to an issue where people feel as though they weren't able to follow the story very well or had issues following the story because let's face it, not everybody really wants to read or will go out of the
Yeah,
way
that's
to
why I
read,
always
which
feel like
is
notes
also
are like better as
issue.
an enhancement instead of like the way that the like main story should be conveyed.
Yeah, I feel there's like two types of players. We released a game some time ago, which we created solely, mostly because we wanted to expand the sound design skills in our team, and we watched some YouTubers playing the game. Half of them just missed all the notes that we put. The other half, like, were really invested in the story and all of that. So I think it's hit or miss with the notes.
Oh, strongly agree with Lily on this one. I think Resident Evil 5 does a pretty good job at that. Well, the notes and whatever files you can find throughout the game more so enhances and adds more context to the story rather than it being a necessity. Even the tip tools that you see during loading screens add to that.
7 as well. It really, really needed it.
No, 7, I feel like it needed more context because even if you know the story verbatim though, there's still a little bit of plot holes that are left unanswered. And I'll definitely need to get answers for those.
Well, at least you got the DLC.
Yeah, I think it's a nice uniqueness that it can provide, though, is that different people read the same thing in different ways. You know, it would be a different voice in your head or whatever else, that sort of thing. So I think it's kind of nice. It kind of like maybe minorly, but it kind of can personalize the journey a little bit. And obviously, not everyone's going to find every file every time. Whereas obviously, if it's like a cutscene, for example, generally, like you're going to just come across all those all the time, apart from maybe a few minor examples. So I think it kind of helps in that respect, and it gives you something to kind of keep an eye out for, to look for. I think they're pretty nice, especially it is more of a functionary role in the earlier games. But I still think nowadays it has its place, even if it's just as a homage to the past.
All right, I guess we're done here. We're good. No more questions.
I think that's it.
Yeah, no,
We're good. We're good. All right, sweet. I guess it's time for outros, ladies and gents. Baron Zemo, give me your outro. Yes, Baron.
Oh, sorry. I heard a different. Sorry. Well, I got nothing to say. Just like you can find me at the same places at all. Twitch slash Vernian. My Twitter, Instagram are linked in there. I do things only in Spanish. I think I have closed captions activated, but I don't know if they show translated. But hey, if you wanna hop on and say hi, I can say hi to you. I can speak English still. I suppose. See.
All right. Bio Double Dumb.
Hi, well, my name is BioDevil Dom. You guys can find me as BioDevil_Dom on YouTube, Twitter, sometimes Twitch. I am working on an RE7 review, but I don't know when I'll have it out. So just look forward to it, I guess. But it is in the works.
All right. Black Shadow.
Yeah, you can find me on YouTube, Black Shadow 993. Also on Twitch at Black_Shadow_993 because someone beat me to the punch, which made me very, very angry. Yeah, you can find me both those locations. I mean, literally early today, I just finished a base handgun run of Resident Evil 4 Professional with no upgrades. So if you like to see someone suffering pain and misery for 15 hours, that's just the place.
Nice. No show Eli. Outro yourself.
You didn't forget me this time. Okay,
I wish I did.
You can find me on Twitter at Gamma Alias or Gamma Eli.
Lily Grey Wolf. Outro yourself, madam.
Oh yeah, great to be a part of the podcast as always. I enjoyed it. You can find me at Lily __ Grey Wolf if you understood what I even just said. So yeah.
All right. And World Creator, man, outro yourself.
Hey, yeah. So thanks for inviting me to this. Well, you can find my YouTube channel for Apocalyptic Universe. Just look for it. That's where I compose mostly my music, and we will be uploading more sound design stuff soon. As for the game studio, Versfera Studios, we were working on a sci-fi project. We froze that, but we will be releasing something soon. And maybe you will hear about it. Hopefully.
All right. That's good. And last but not least, you can find me on Twitter at Immortal Brendel. You can find me on Twitch.
You gotta do him like that.
He forgot me again.
Every time.
He always does that. I swear to God.
All right, Renegade, outro yourself.
Well, you can find me on Twitter at RenOperative_. You can find me on YouTube at Renegade Operative, and I will be trying to edit this podcast because I have some motorbikes outside, so I gotta fix that. But yeah,
Nice.
Overall, great discussions. Thought we weren't gonna finish the doc. We finished it, and good stuff from here.
All right, cool. Yeah, once again, you can find me as Paragon Operative on Twitter at Immortal Brendel, Sir Brendel on Twitch, and yada, none of your business. Thank you all for watching or listening, depending on how you do it, wherever time of day it is. And I hope you have a safe whatever you're going to do right now. Bye. Wear your mask, take your shots, and stop being fools.
TDF Enzo.
Yeah. Bye.